Am I allowed to be turned on? One of the paradoxes of love is that it is often inspired by the way people look, but isn't generally meant to be based on looks. This leaves us with a conundrum. How much should one care about physical appearance? Is beauty entirely beside the point, or an essential part of the feeling of love? Throughout history, many philosophies and religions have waged war on our physical forms, arguing that real value must lie elsewhere, in our souls and in our minds. Christianity did not invent guilt and shame around the body. It was merely drawing upon a permanent human proclivity. There is one tradition of art which provides a welcome way out of this dilemma. In the art of the ancient Greeks, we get the first and clearest expression in the West of what one might call paganism, not merely in the obvious sense that the Greeks were not Christians, but in their attitude toward physical allure. The ancient Greeks were unusual compared with Christians in being immensely concerned with the outward as well as the inward excellence of their divinities. Apollo was the god of light, truth, and healing. To the Greeks, he couldn't have had such a status and possessed such wonderful powers if he did not have ideally beautiful pectoral muscles and a graceful posture. In opposition to this thesis, some early Christian thinkers, notably Tertullian, claimed that Jesus must have been ugly so as to keep his spiritual worth independent of any outward charm. By contrast, paganism trusts physical beauty and is optimistic about the promise proffered by our outer form. The Greek term for beauty, kalon, does not distinguish between physical loveliness and inner goodness. Good things simply are simultaneously beautiful, an idea that lingers on in our day only in very restricted areas. For example, in our thinking about clothes. It would be strange to say, "I've got a very good pair of trousers, but unfortunately they are ugly." The Greeks thought about the appearance of people the way we think about the appearance of clothes. They read the wisdom and nobility of Apollo in his face, in the way his cloak was draped over his arm, and in the lightness of his back leg with his big toe just touching the ground. These were not, to their mind, minor matters. This is what they thought a supremely admirable man should look like. Since the Greeks, a line of artists have followed the pagan spirit. Among them, Botticelli, Titian, Klimt, and Picasso. Their message to us has been that we do not need to divorce the body from the spirit, that our physical envelopes are not shameful or opposed to the so-called higher values. This may belong to a movement in the history of art, but it is also evidence of a mature integration of different strands of our psyches. The ancient Greeks would have been puzzled by the modern distinction between pornography and art. There was simply good and bad art. As currently constituted, pornography asks that we leave behind our ethics, our aesthetic sense, and our intelligence when we contemplate it. But the lesson of pagan artists is that we shouldn't need to make a choice between sex and virtue. Sex can be invited to support rather than permitted to undermine our higher values. During a few wise periods in its history, even Christian art understood that physical desire did not have to be the enemy of goodness and could, if properly marshaled, lend energy and intensity to it. In altarpieces by Fra Filippo Lippi or Sandro Botticelli, not only is the Madonna beautifully dressed and set against an enchanting background, she is also attractive. And though this point is not typically dwelt upon in art historical discussions or museum catalogs, often quite simply a turn-on. In deliberately striving for this effect, Christian artists were not contravening the caution generally shown by their religion towards sexuality. Rather, they were affirming that sexuality could be invited to promote a project of edification. If viewers were to be persuaded that Mary had been one of the noblest human beings who ever lived, the embodiment of kindness, self-sacrifice, sweetness, and goodness, it might help if she was also pictured as having been, in the most subliminal and delicate of ways, physically attractive too. Through such works, we derive a more joined-up sense of human nature, in which our capacity for erotic excitement, our need for emotional closeness, and our longing for stable family life are not pulling us in opposite directions. These works are the opposite of pornography, which pulls us apart by making us feel that sexual fulfillment requires us to suspend or ignore the rest of our needs. They matter because a harmony between the body and the spirit is part of the way we spontaneously imagine love to be at its best. In the intense, usually brief phase of being in love at the start of a relationship, our hormones ensure that eroticism and moral admiration are at one. Art could and should be a vital technology for renewing and safeguarding this kind of ideal alignment in the long term.